couple of little things that I did with my goal kicking technique. So I always started the ball down that right corridor, so about 1 metre in from that right upright is where I started the ball, because I had that natural right to left ball flight. So that's where I set up my balls on my seam. From there, 4 steps, 2, 3, 4, just on this 45, and then just got myself slightly high on the ball just with a small step. So for me, it felt like I could get up the back of the ball more, stronger foot, get in a better position. So this worked for me down that right corridor. For me, it was really important that I took this first step quite slow. So slow first step, keep me control, build momentum. So that was really crucial. If I rushed that, I got too cramped, and then just stayed in the kick. So I'd always give myself the cue, trust my timing, stay in the kick, and hopefully you get a good result. So trust my timing, stay in the kick. Slow first step. Good result. So the first style of kicking we're going to cover off is the hurdle style. So you commonly see this in American football. They use it at the start of games or during the game to kick the ball downfield for their kickoff. The objective for the kick is to get max distance and max hang time. So they want to put their max effort into it. So how they do this is they take a massive run up, and when they actually get into the ball, so they're coming through, huge long run up, when they get to the ball, their foot gets nice and high, but they let all this momentum come through the ball and then nice and high with the follow through, and then actually land on this foot here. So it's the max amount of power. They're not too worried about where the ball's going. They just want to get the max amount of force through the ball. So just cover that off again. Massive fast run up to the ball. They land with their plant foot, foot comes through, and then they land again back on that foot. So one of the drills that they actually do is they put down a hurdle in front of the ball. That teaches their leg to get nice and high in the follow through, get through the ball, win some space past the ball, and that's where you see that hurdle style come in. The second style we're going to cover off is the foot down straight away technique. So this is a real efficient way of kicking the ball with a controlled approach and a really controlled follow through. So it's also a training drill that all kickers can use to really teach themselves to get the momentum going through the ball, and it's more about your body getting through the ball and into your follow through straight away, hence why the foot down works really well. So as I'm coming into the ball with a foot down approach, I'm bringing really good momentum. My plant foot gets set, I get a nice energy stored behind the ball. Once I've made impact with the ball though, my foot's getting through the ball a little bit, but then coming straight back down to the ground, hence why it's called the foot down technique. So again, we make impact with the ball, make a nice strike, and then get that plant foot straight back down. So again, the focus of this foot down technique is that momentum, so I want to keep things going through the ball. So getting that foot, getting my foot straight back down, allows me to get my momentum really traveling through that ball and towards the target. So a really good training drill, something that you can use if you need to work on your momentum, is use this foot down technique to fix that. The third style we're going to cover is the hop technique. Now this is the most common kicking style that you see in World Rugby today. At the Rugby World Cup, most of the kickers are using the hop technique. It's also used in American football as well. They use that hurdle style for their kickoffs for max distance, but when they're actually having a shot for goal and wanting to get those points, they use the hop technique because it's got a lot more control to it. So for me, it's got the best balance between control and accuracy, but also getting that distance. So once we've come into our approach, what does the hop technique look like? So we get our plant foot set, we get through the ball really well, but I'm actually going to hop on this plant foot and hop forward with the ball. So if I do it at about 50%, so I get my load up pre-kick, come through the kicking technique and hop on that left foot. The reason I really like it is it means that I can get big power stored behind the kick and actually let my kicking foot get through after I've made impact along the line towards the target, so I can stay in that kick nice and long, also while winning momentum with that positive hop, so hopping through the target. One thing that does tend to happen is sometimes this hop can head out to the left because I'm swinging around the ball, but we'll cover that when we get into the 10 pillars. When it comes to your kicking technique, it needs to be your kicking technique. So I don't really mind which of these 3 styles you have or whether you have something unique, but when it comes to the 10 pillars, I've created them so that they can be applied to all different techniques. It just helps you understand your detail and be able to answer all those little questions, especially when you get into games and the pressure comes on and you start missing kicks. Understanding your detail is going to help you really problem solve really quickly and then make you a more successful kicker moving forward. So I want to introduce you guys to Georgia Cormack. She's in a lot of the Rugby Bricks video. We've done a lot of training down here at Gosh's Paddock together. Georgia's the halfback for the Wallaroos, which is the Australian women's 15 side. Now, when I started training with G, she's obviously 5'2", 55 kilos. We had to come up with ways of creating more power and energy. So it was a really awesome thing for my coaching and learning how to create more power. But what we've come up with is some really awesome body training techniques that all kickers can use to find more power and store more energy pre-kick so that you can put it through the ball. So with that, having a long range kicking game where we need to kick the ball downfield and exit really well, it's a really good asset to have as a player to be able to kick the ball a really long way and also take those long range shots at goal. Cool, G, so go for a jog and get warm. We'll carry on talking. So it's been a really cool thing being here in Melbourne because of all the different sports. So there's sports like the NRL, Australian rules, where they use a really awesome kicking game. So in Australian rules, they quite often do all their kick passes, and that's a kick that's about 60-70%. Same thing in the NRL when they get to their last set and last play where they need to kick the ball. They're doing a kick that still is around 60 or 70%, like a kick pass across the field or a grubber. In rugby, we need to have a max effort, so 100% kick that we can use, again going back to those exit kicks and long range shots at goal. So that's why we've put a lot of time and effort into developing this power. Yes, we need to have the tight 60% kicking game, but it's a real asset to have that 100% max kick when we need to pull it out of the bag. So one of the first things we tend to do when we're coaching players to kick the ball is stand opposite them 10 metres and start with just a really simple bend of the knee and just kicking to each other. All we're teaching is just the knee flick. So then we try to get a little bit more distance, we just flick harder with our knee and everything is out the front of the kick. We're not actually storing any energy in our upper body or using our big strong glute to really get some power through the ball. Hence why we've come up with these body training drills. So this is stage one of the body training drill. Now you don't have to have lines or be at the rugby field, you can do this in your lounge at home. How you line up your feet, so G's got her left foot, her toes lined up on the line, she's a right foot kicker. Your other foot is just floating off the ground, so not touching, but in line with the front of the toes. The reason we get into this position is this is her lockout point. So at the time of impact with the ball, her legs fully locked out, hip, knee and foot, with a big hard plantar flex foot. So that's really important to have that big hard foot so we can get it up the back of the ball. So within stage one, we're just worrying about the legs so our hands can stay just in front of our body. So the first thing we want to get is hip extension. So rather than that knee bending first, we actually want to get that hip going first. So nice straight leg, G gets her hips, and therefore we get our hip extension. We're already starting to store energy out the back. Then we get that knee flexion, which is the bend of that knee. So let's try really get back. And as you can see here from the video, we're already starting to store heaps of energy behind that point of contact. So from here we just do a 3-second count. So G's going to take 3 seconds to get to that point. So going back nice and slow. Now we get that knee bend. From here she stays here for 3 seconds, 2, 1, and then returns to home in 3 seconds. So it's a 9-second count. We get through 5 reps of that. Go again, G. So what this is going to teach us is I'm really focusing on that glute, really trying to get that energy stored back there and really try to get a little bit more hip extension each time we do it. Another rep, G. So really getting that hip extension really well, bit of knee flexion and then returning home. And I'm really liking how G, when she gets back here, she's got that big hard foot really locking up. This is also going to challenge that plant foot. You can see that foot really having to balance and work hard to keep her plant foot stable, which is then going to transfer onto the field. Nice, G. So getting into stage 2 now, we're going to bring in this upper body and try bring some real good energy and store energy behind the kick in our upper body as well. So it's called the rodeo arm. We're going to go into that when we get into the 10 pillars, but all you need to know for now is that it can help us store energy behind the ball. So this left arm's going to get up, G's going to get our rodeo arm up. So the really cool thing is this left shoulder and our right glute can store energy. So they can really co-activate behind the ball and then we can put all that energy through the ball. So now we're going to bring it into stage 2 body training. So another little bit of detail around this rodeo arm. So where do we want to get it? So if G puts her hand up, if we think that that's 180 degrees directly up and down, we want to be at 145 degrees from that vertical line. So that's where we want to get to. That's where you can be nice and balanced through the kick. Everything else is going to stay the same in stage 2. So same setup with our foot. So G's going to get her foot nice and hard, just floating off the ground, big hard plantar flex foot, locked up. So we're going to bring in that rodeo arm. So at the same time she's going to get her extension behind her kick in her lower half. Let's go G. So drawing back slowly, that rodeo arm's going to get up nice and strong as well. So as you can see already, we've got great extension through this left shoulder, and this right glute is really working hard. Again, that co-activation we can get through the ball. G returns home, that rodeo arm comes across her body. At the time of impact, when that foot is hitting the ball, our rodeo arm is directly in line with our target. Let's go again, G. Good energy stored, not rushing anything, so that 3-second count. She comes back to the ball, rodeo arm comes across her body, and at the time of impact with the ball, lines up with her target. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. So now we get into stage 3. So G's going to store this energy and now let it come out with the momentum. Now G uses the hop style technique, so you'll see that get through on her plant foot. But same thing, we're going to get our 3-second count back. We're going to hold for 3 seconds and let that momentum come out. Start relatively small with this, so 60% with your momentum and your follow through. So this is what it looks like. So 3, 2, 1. We're going to pause here for 3, 2, 1, and then let that momentum come out through to target. And go again. So let's go again. 3, 2, 1. Good energy stored. 3, 2, and then let that momentum flow through. Beautiful. So stage 3 can be quite a complicated movement, putting it all together. So I like to work from 50%, 75, and then into 100. So all that means is from here, I get my plant foot set, big, hard, locked up foot. I'm just going to go to 50% of the movement. So a little bit of extension, a smaller rodeo arm, and just be happy hopping through on that plant foot. So getting used to that movement. So G's going to get through the 3 reps. She's going to start off at 50%, so nice and small. So a little bit of extension, good rodeo arm, and just get the body used to that hop motion and getting used to that technique. So let's go 75% G, so store a little bit more energy and then get through to target. Nice, same thing, we want that rodeo arm nice in line with target and then coming across our body. Awesome. I'd really suggest encourage. Nice. So that's the 3 stages of body training. I'd really encourage you guys, coaches or players, to use this with your playing and with your techniques. So again, the common error that I see is we do just focus on that knee flick without actually storing energy behind the kick. This way it's going to tell your body before a kicking session exactly what muscles we want to turn on so that we can get more power and distance through our ball. Pillar number 1 is mindset, and I wanted to do it away from the rugby field. So much of what goes on your head can be developed and talked about and worked on outside of the rugby field and away from the training pitch. So we're going to cover off 3 things that really helped me develop my thoughts so that when it come to a big pressure moment, I could rely on my mindset so that my technique could execute. So those 3 things are, we're going to go through a goal kicking diary. So I'm going to take you guys through my goal kicking diary, what it looked like and how you can really develop that. People who can help with your goal kicking technique, and ways of thinking that really helped me progress my goal kicking technique and my mindset around that. So the first one was having a goal kicking diary. Now the best thing about having the diary is it really organises your thoughts. So after every session, being able to document in there something, I always just used to write one line, and organising that in the diary meant that when I come back to my next session or my next game, I'd really touched on that point. I know that there was a focus or something that I wasn't slightly getting right. It just meant that it wasn't just up in the air and I didn't know what happened in that session. So that was the best thing about organising my thoughts, so I could reflect back on it. It also shows the hours and dedication that you're putting in. So quite often a couple of years may go by and you've got no recollection of what you've covered off with your goal kicking technique. So having something that you can go back through, read through sessions, see what trends are happening within your kicking game. It's great to have a diary for those learnings. The last thing with the diary is I always used to write down, this is my technique. So every couple of months, just check in, cover off all the pillars. I didn't even know I was sort of covering off those 10 pillars, but this is my approach. This is my position I get my plant foot into. This is how I want to make contact with the ball. This is my ball setup. This is how I win momentum. And why I like that is all you're doing once you've organized those thoughts is when it comes to a practice game or a real game, you get into the game and you've got a kick, all you're doing is checking off those boxes, making sure you nail each of those points that you've already organized, and then goal kicking becomes really easy. The flip side of that is when you do miss one of those checkpoints, you know straight away what it was, get straight into your next kick and you can make that adjustment. The second part of mindset is people who can help. You need to have conversations with a lot of people who have all been there and done it and had a lot of success. So I had a few people along my way. The first one I want to talk about is Ken Hodge. Now, Ken Hodge was a sports psychologist at the University of Otago. I had a few conversations with him around goal kicking mindset. And the cool thing about speaking with sports psychologists is they're not just focused on rugby and goal kicking. They've had a lot of different experiences with different sports, different ways of thinking and how to handle pressure. So he was massive for me. The best thing that I learnt about from Ken Hodge was the quiet eye. So when I got into a game, he just mentioned about being really aware of what your eyes are looking at. So for me, it was look at the ball, look at my target, back to the ball, look at my target, back to the ball. So yes, that's a really simple thing and probably goes without saying, but if you let your eyes get distracted during a game and look away and during a kick and when you're trying to be really focused, you've lost that conversation and it's gone out of the kick. So that was just one of many cues that I picked up from Ken Hodge. My coach at the time, Tony Brown, was a huge help to my goal kicking. He often would just give me one cue that I had to work on for 2 or 3 weeks. And because we spent so much time together, so many sessions, so many seasons of just picking up little cues, nothing was ever major. It was just a little adjustment to focus on. He was able to see things, especially in like a game warm-up. He'd be able to see something that was going on, quick adjustment, and we're back to striking the ball well. The other piece of that puzzle was Hayden Parker, so a kicker that I played alongside with. We were both the first fives with Otago, and we had a lot of kicking sessions where we'd just have so many conversations. How are you doing this? How are you feeling that? What do you do with your ball setup? Or why do you focus on this? And all of those small conversations were nothing too lengthy, but what it meant is that all those thoughts were going into the book and I was able to really organize what was going to work for me. One more example of a conversation I had was with Lima Sopawanga. So he played for the Highlanders and also the All Black, playing for Wasp at the moment. He would often look at someone in the crowd. So the team would score, they'd get a penalty. He'd look at someone in the crowd, identify them. For example, that guy's got on a green shirt. So that simple little thought took his brain away from the task of goal kicking, the pressure and everything else, identified that, and then when he came back to his process, it was starting from scratch. There was no external thoughts before he had to put the ball on the tee and get through his process. The last thing when it comes to people is you get your confidence from making game kicks. So when you're playing a game, pressure's on and you slot a kick, you will get so much confidence from that kick. Yes, it's really important to put in all the hours on the training field, but you have to have relationships with people and coaches to be able to put your hand up and say, yes, I'm ready to take these kicks in games. When you make those kicks, your confidence is going to go through the roof. So the third thing we're going to cover off is ways of thinking when it comes to goal kicking. So the first one is all about flow state. Not every kicking session has to be a max kicking session where we're taking big long range shots, really trying to get a full range of motion through the kick. Quite often we overload our muscles and we get hurt and injured and can't work on our goal kicking. So it is something you have to be really aware of, is not overloading and overtraining those muscles. It doesn't mean that you can't train most days and work on your craft. So flow state is all about working around 70%. Just means that we can get out there with a soccer ball, work on our grubber kicks, work on our touch finders, work on our every different style of kick that we want to try to do within 70%. So we've already covered off body training, that would fall into flow state. So the way that I use as an example is a basketballer. They can take a basketball down to the court by themselves, have a really slow moving warm up, work on their dribbling, work on their jump shots. Nothing's really forced or a max movement. So we can take that into rugby training. So just with your kicking sessions, when you are going down by yourself with your bag of balls, just be happy having a kicking session where you're not just going for long range kicks and your max efforts. Work on your craft, your muscle memory, your body training, and it's really going to help you move forward with that flow state of training. So just to wrap that up, you may only have 10 shots at goal during a training session, and that training session may have gone for 40 minutes, 60 minutes. But if you just have 10 shots, that's absolutely fine if you've covered off all those other different movements, your body training and everything else that covers off when it comes to goal kicking. Don't feel like just having shots at goal are the be all end all of goal kicking. So the second thing I want to cover is I had a 60% rule when it comes to my energy levels in game. So it might be the very first minute of a game, or it might be the 60th minute of the game. I always tried to kick around 60%, or what I thought was 60%. So if we get a penalty in the first 30 seconds and I've got to have a shot at goal, I've actually got to tell my body to get ready and get excited so I can be really deliberate through the kick. On the flip side of that, if it's the 60th minute, I've just been for a massive run or chased a kick, and my heart rate's through the roof, I'm really excited, I've actually got to tell myself, just calm myself down, get back within my body so I can really be deliberate through the kick as well. So that 60% thing isn't really measurable, but for me it was just a good mental thing to say, every time I'm taking a kick, I want to be at about 60% energy levels, and that's what I aim for. Pressure is something you're going to have to deal with as a goal kicker, being in stadiums where a lot of people are looking at you execute your skill. So we can take all that energy from these people and put it through our rugby ball. So I use the example of 10,000 eyes. So when you're taking your kick, you've got your 2 eyes plus all the crowd, all their eyeballs looking at the back of the ball. So you can take all that energy and put it through the back of the ball along with your own energy. So it's a real thing that you either want to get out of that situation or you become really addicted to that situation. It's why taking kicks in games and making kicks becomes really addictive for goal kickers, because that energy and that focus is such a great feeling, especially when you execute. So take your time, enjoy that focus. You'll become addicted to taking those game kicks and really enjoy that energy going through the ball. Becoming locked in is a really fun thing to train with, so ask your family members and your teammates, coaches to help out with this. Here's a really good example of me trying to put off G when it comes to a goal kicking and remaining locked in within the kick. So one really important part of mindset for me is becoming locked in on your task. So G's taking a kick, and I think as a coach it's really something you can help with is trying to distract this player. So it doesn't matter whether I'm standing here walking in G's line, getting really close to her, calling her chicken legs and how ugly her boots are, she doesn't hear it. The other thing you can do is roll balls across the front of her, and also as she gets close to the ball, just trying to distract her. So she's going to miss this kick because she's not a very good goal kicker, but G's able to step up, stay really locked in. So at training, when you get people coming over to watch you kick, really enjoy that moment. Ask people to try and distract you, drop things, yell at you, call your names, because that's what's coming in a game. To wrap up this pillar number 1, I want to talk about rhythm. So when you're kicking the ball well, when you're goal kicking well, you are in rhythm. So think about a cricketer that's scoring a lot of runs, a basketball player that's just on fire with their shooting. They're absolutely in rhythm and they're not trying to force things too hard. So when you feel like you've got rhythm, when you're kicking well, don't overdo your sessions. Don't go looking for something else. Just be happy that you're in rhythm and kicking the ball well. When you're not, we need to get back to that rhythm state. So that's the time to work really hard, put in the hours, something's going to click eventually. But when you feel like you're not kicking the ball well, don't feel like you need to stop. Feel like you're really attention to detail. Try find that next thing, that next cue that's really going to help you kicking so that you can get back to being in rhythm. So as promised, I want to take you guys through my goal kicking diary, show you guys what it looked like. I set this up when I was 21 and I've still got it today, and it's sort of turned into more of a coaching diary for me. So let's have a look through this. So this here's my diary. What I was chasing was the 10,000 hour rule. So the 10,000 hour rule is that. So it's the idea that it takes approximately 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to master any skill. So that was what I was aiming for. What I would do is I'd just write down the date, the place, that it was Logan Park, 12 o'clock. What did I say? Very first session. Fell away to the left knee, same eye routine each time. So my handwriting wasn't that good. There's an old coffee stain from when I spilt a coffee, obviously. But just recorded all my sessions, and then quite often I'd put in my favourite players. So Matt Giddo from the Wallabies was a guy I used to love watching kick. And then just recording sessions. Who else did I have in here? Dan Carter, can't go without him. Percy Montgomery, wrote down the old J not C rule from Matt Carrington. So it's pretty cool when you start your diary, you come up with all your old plans and see how you used to organise your thoughts. There was my ball flight, so starting the ball down that right corridor, which I've talked about before. So all this stuff sort of started 10 years ago of organising my thoughts of trial and error. Surfers surf, that was a big thing that I went through with Ken Hodge. So we spoke about a surfer on a wave, just enjoying the wave and not overthinking things. So I had the cue surfers surf, kickers kick, stop thinking. So that was a really big thing for me. So there's my goal kicking diary. I'd really encourage you guys to start yours and set it up so you can really start organising your thoughts when it comes to goal kicking. So now we're into pillar number 2, which is all about our ball setup. Now for me, setting the ball up on your tee is a task that we can do at 100%. So there's no reason why every kick at training, every kick we ever do in a game, the ball setup can be set up exactly how we want it at 100%. So I always remember when standing at the back of my mark, I was really happy with how the ball was looking. If we're looking at the back of the ball and really happy with that setup, we're going to be a lot more confident when it comes into the kick. First thing I want to talk about when it comes to ball setup is the valve on the rugby ball. So on most match balls it sits within the seam, and for me I always had it valve down. So I don't really mind if you have it valve down or valve up, just not sitting on the side of the ball. It does have a bit of weight to it, so it can cause the ball to wobble. Next thing is talking about the rugby ball seam. So at the moment this seam is lined up perfectly at the camera. Now if I actually roll the seams in, you can see that that top seam and the bottom seam is actually falling over and rolling. So this is going to affect the ball flight. Same thing as well, if I turn that ball out, the top seam and that bottom seam are now falling over. So depending on your kicking style or what ball flight you're after, you have to be aware of what your seams are doing. Again, the rugby ball is not this perfect shape. It has got seams and it has got weight that we have to control. When it comes to low tee kickers, whether they're using the RB Wolf or the RB Wolf Plus, another thing that we can do is actually roll the ball out so that we can expose that sweet spot as well. Also, we can lean the ball forward, and again, that's really going to expose that big sweet spot of the ball, and hence why on the back of the RB Wolf kicking tee, I just wanted that big drop off. So the reason that I like just a single height kicking tee is every time I put the ball on the ground and the tee on the ground, it's the exact same height. So I know that no matter what, there's been no change in my tee, and the height that I'm setting the ball up is the exact same every kick that I'm taking. So now we're into pillar number 3, which is all about our long target. So for me, I've heard a few different things when it comes to aiming our kicks. Some people aiming for clouds. I don't like moving targets. Aiming for people in the crowd, that might change. What if you don't have a crowd or there's no grandstand behind you? So for me, I'm all about having that long target in the distance. As you can see there, G's standing directly under the post. So for me, that's a close target that isn't far enough of the distance. We want to have something through the post, 20, 30 meters, that's on the ground, that's the line of the target that we want to start our ball flight on. So for me, I always had a right to left ball flight, so I always started at that target of G, so just 1 meter inside the post, starting down that right corridor of the post with my natural draw to the middle of the post. So it really worked for me. It was what I always tried to achieve when there was no winds or any other factors. Started down that right corridor and the ball would always come back to the middle of the post. So as you can see now, G's moved back. She's 20 meters through the post, which for me is now a long target. So quite often when we have sideline kicks and we get wide out, our target is far away in the distance, so it's actually a much easier kick, and for some reason those kicks feel easier and we get a much better ball strike because we've got that long target. So when we get kicks, just like we are here around this 15-meter line or even closer to in front, we quite often look up at the post and just see this big open space, and then we don't actually have that long target on the line that we want to kick through. So that's why I'm so big on this. And lastly, aim small, miss small. So a lot of snipers use this. They aim for a really small target, which means that they miss small. So for me, I'd be aiming for G's left boot. So now we're into pillar number 4, which is all about our approach to the ball. So we quite often see kickers on TV, your Dan Carters, Johnny Wilkinsons. They've got really unique things within their kicking technique. When you're starting out, you've got to start really simple and feel what's going to work for you. So for me, whenever I'm starting out with a kicker, I always get them on 45 degrees. So hence why I've set up just on this cross so you can see the 45 degrees. For a start with my body, well, I want to have everything at the back of the ball. So starting with my feet at the back of the ball, hips at the back of the ball, chest and head, everything focused. That way, as I'm coming into the ball, there's no angles that I've got to try fix when it comes to my kicking technique. Quite often when we're approaching and we tuck my shoulders under and get on a big angle, I've got to try fix this in my follow through and often can't get things going through to target. So keep things really simple for a start: feet, hips, chest, head, everything coming into the ball at the back of the ball. So quite often with our approach in games, we actually change how we approach the ball. So especially at the start of the game where we've got heaps of energy, we're quite excited, sometimes we take a really quick first step. What will happen if I'm big here, once I get to the ball, I'm going to be really crowded and not be able to get through my full range of my kicking technique. So for me, it was something that I had to try to work out. For me, this first step was really slow and really small. It just meant that once I got to the ball, everything, my plant foot, and I had enough room to use my full kicking technique to get through the ball. So just be really aware, whatever you're doing at whatever stage in the game, that first step is really consistent. If you nail that first step, everything else will be consistent. So practicing your approach is really important. So for me, a 45 degree is really important. I have to try really make sure that I'm going back on that 45 degrees. So as you can see here, if I take one wrong move at the start, clearly I'm not at that 45 degree spot that I want to try be at. So it's a visual thing, it's a practice thing. Also just with your steps, again, if at the start of the game I'm really excited and I get big and really try to get back, I'm going to be a half meter from where I actually need to be, which is consistent to my kicking technique and to my approach. So what you can do to practice this, for me, 45 degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, just make a little mark on the ground just at the front of your toes and both feet. Then you can go back into the ball and practice to see how close you can get again to those two little marks. And for me, I'm actually 1 inch away from where I was. So get some real consistency in your approach, practice it and play around with how accurate you can get to getting to the back of your mark. So now we're on to pillar number 5, which is all about our big strong rodeo arm. So we've already covered this off in the body training a little bit before we've got into this session. With the rodeo arm, I wanted to come up with a name for it. There was a really easy coaching cue for players to use and pick up on when we use it. So the reason why this rodeo arm is so important is so that we can actually use our upper body strength along with our lower half of our body to put energy and power through the ball. Our human body's got this amazing fascia that wraps us like a rubber band, and this anterior oblique sling along with the posterior oblique sling can really help to co-activate and put energy through the rugby ball. I see a lot of kickers that have got a rodeo arm, but they're actually not getting the max amount of energy that they can get out of this rodeo arm. So if my rodeo arm is low and lazy, it actually means that my extension out the back isn't going to be as big. So I'm not going to get that nice big hip extension and knee flexion alongside a big strong rodeo arm. So if this is lazy, then quite often we miss out on energy that we can put through the ball. So some more detail on what we want our rodeo arm doing during the kick. So pre-kick, we want to use this for our extension. We get our good hip extension, plus we're using this big strong rodeo arm to store energy. So just with this, don't over rotate. So we just want it in line with our chest on where we want to go. So we don't need to pull back, getting our chest rotated. So again, we store energy pre-kick at the time of impact. My rodeo arm is lining up with my target, so hitting the ball, rodeo arm is in front, and then we want to go past our body and help with that flexion part of the kick. So extension out the back, we get good flexion, our rodeo arm comes across our body. One thing you quite often see is we store all this energy and then we chop down, which is going to stop our flexion. So the last thing we want to do is come up short with our follow through and flexion. So big energy stored, impact across our body, which is going to keep our upper body tall and get that follow through nice and big through the target. Pillar number 6 is about our plant foot. Now when you watch most international kickers, they're actually not landing in the same line as their target. They're landing around about 30 degrees. So quite often it was coached for a long time that your plant foot had to land in the same line as your target. So for me, doing a lot of research, working with a lot of kickers, watching thousands of kicks, you see this plant foot actually landing at 30 degrees. Now the reason why is the human body and the angle that we come on with that hip joint being a ball and socket joint, this plant foot actually enjoys landing at that angle. It just means that we can get through the ball and our follow through can get through to target along with that kicking foot to target as well. So the question often comes up on where this plant foot should be landing. So behind the tee, in line with the tee, in front of the tee. So for me, it's really important to have a look at where the strongest lockout point is. What's the lockout point? So G's locked up, hip, knee, foot is in line. She's really strong and powerful. That's where she wants to be making impact. So for a lot of kickers, they actually find that getting in front of the ball, so long range kickers with big long levers, actually are leaving their plant foot slightly behind the kicking tee. It's where they feel like they're the strongest. For a lot of kickers that like to kick the ball low to the ground, so G gets a bit of a lean on because that's what she does when she approaches the ball. The lockout point is actually closer to the midline of the tee. So video yourself kicking, see where you're looking the most powerful, and then from there you can play around with where this plant foot is landing. You do need to give yourself some space, so we don't want to crowd the ball because bad things happen. We block the ball and leave the ball to the right of the post, but we do need to find out where we're the most strongest and where we're the most comfortable. But again, just to cover off those points, we don't have to be landing in line. We can have up to 30 degrees and just find out where you're going to be the strongest with that lockout point as well. So just on video to show some of the different effects that what a plant foot can do with where it's landing. So if I get really crowded on the ball, I'm not going to be able to get through the ball with a nice hard foot. I'm going to probably hit the ball a little bit too high up, closer to that ankle joint. So crowding the ball, wrapping the ball a lot, a range of different things can happen. We can leave the ball over to the right, or because we're swooping, get a big rogue hook on it. If I get too far back from the ball, quite often my foot gets through, but we're not hitting that nice hard foot knuckle. We get a little bit tinny and we get that undercut and a whole heap of backspin. If we get too far forward, and again we're not comfortable in this position, again we're getting through the ball really early, and of course everything's going to the right, so I'm going to leave the ball over there, and it's not my strongest point. I'm probably still going to have my knee bend. I'm not going to be in that nice locked out hard powerful position. So that's why it's really important to watch your own technique, find out what's going to work best for you, and see where you're getting that big strong lockout point. So we're playing on a really muddy ground where I'm not really too confident that I'm going to get my plant foot nice and stable. How do we adjust with this? So what I used to do with my approach is I used to give myself just a little bit higher on the ball, so that when I arrived at the ball, my plant foot wasn't coming in at such a big angle. I could be a little bit squarer and trust this ground that my plant foot could get set. So play around with that. Again, it's something that worked for me in a really ugly muddy conditions. You did have to make a small adjustment because we were coming in a little bit squarer, but I would rather get a good balanced plant foot so I could get a nice strike on the ball rather than slipping out and then not even getting a chance of getting the ball over. Pillar number 7 is all about our kicking foot and the position that we're getting into. So we need to get it into the plantar flex position, which is pointed toes really hard and expose this big hard foot knuckle. So I quite often call it trout foot, so like a fish flopping all over the place. If we don't get that foot nice and hard, we can't get a big hard strike up the back of the ball and be really powerful and get a good strike. So it's really important, again with that body training stuff, to really train our foot position to be in that nice hard plantar flex position. We want a hard foot on every style of kick that we're doing, so quite often with drop kicks or when we try to get height, we actually turn our foot up and try to scoop it. We still want to keep our foot nice and hard and locked up. We just may impact at a higher point with our ball drop. So it's really important every kick to have a plantar flex foot. When we're goal kicking, we actually want to get some elevation in our kick. So sometimes we see a soccer effect where our foot gets too side on, where we're trying to push the ball along the ground, hence what they do in football and soccer. We still need to stay up the back of the ball so we can get that nice elevation and allow our follow through to get the elevation with that big hard foot. So depending on what kicking tee you use depends on how you get your kicking foot up the back of the ball. So if you're using the RB Vortex mid-cut or a tee that's slightly higher, we can allow our foot to get up the back of the ball nice and strong, plantar flex, and probably on that angle there, really up the back of the ball, which is nice and strong. If we're using a low kicking tee like the RB Wolf, we still get a nice hard foot, but we actually get slightly lower. So quite often our body's in a lower position, a more angled position. Think of a guy like Dan Carter at the point of impact. His body's on quite a lean because he's nice and strong at that point. So when you're doing your body training drills, it's really important that you're training your body to get into the position that you want your foot to be in at the time of impact. Pillar number 8 is our foot and hips up the back of the ball. So for me, kicking off a tee should feel just as easy and you should be able to get just as nice a strike as kicking out of hand. Quite often when we kick out of hand, the ball's in front of us, we get a nice strong strike, elevation's not a problem, and everything's in front of us, in front of the ball. So when we kick off a tee, quite often we get too side on and actually leave our hips and don't get anything behind the ball. So for me, it was a big thing from my approach was actually getting slightly higher on the ball. So when I took my approach, instead of being on that 45 degrees, for me to get that nice feeling of being behind the ball, I just took a small instep. That meant that when I got to my strike and got to that big strong lockout point, I felt like I was up the back of the ball with my foot, but also my hips had some power going through the back of the ball as well. One thing that's really important with getting your foot and hips up at the back of the ball is just being aware of not sitting on the kick within your hips. So quite often when we kick out of hand, we're big and tall, big extension, our hips are really strong. We need to have that same feeling through the rugby ball. So almost like a hip thrust in the gym, we're using our hips to get that nice hip extension. If we stay sitting in the kick and stay in that sitting position, it's really hard to get a lot of power through that ball. So at the time of impact, be strong through your hips and allow that foot to get up the back and really use that hip energy to get some more power through the ball as well. Pillar number 9 is all about momentum, and when I think about momentum, it's winning this half meter pre-ball and then winning this half meter post ball. So generally the first part of the kick's really easy to do. We're coming in strong, good body position and getting our plant foot in a really good position. So we've got good momentum. At the time of impact, we really want to be nice and tall and over the midline of the ball. That's going to help with our momentum as well, rather than being behind the ball. So we've won this half meter. It's really important, and why I like the hop technique, that once we've made impact, that we're actually hopping through and winning this half meter with our body getting through there as well. Quite often we come to the ball, and if we're leaning back and get this plant foot locked up and straight, pull away on that C shape, we don't win this half meter, and as you can see, my body hasn't won the half meter through the ball. So really crucial thing when you're watching yourself on video, win this half meter, win that half meter, and you will have won momentum through the kick. With momentum on your approach, kind of like a plane taking off, we've got to build speed. So again, with that first step, if we're really quick and get moving too fast, we're not going to be controlled and balanced at the ball. So for me, it was all about that slow first step and then really building momentum into the ball. So that's going to help winning that first part of momentum as well. Just a cue when it comes to momentum is that this plant foot can't be a big hard locked out foot brake. So if I'm landing here with a straight leg, it's going to be really hard to get through this ball really well and get moving forward. So this leg's got to be soft, it's got to be able to cushion ourselves and get balanced. That means that my big strong kicking leg can get through and I can actually get my momentum moving forward. So just watch this plant foot on video again. If it's big and straight, it's probably going to be hard to get going forward and might be causing that C shape. Keep it balanced so that you can be nice and soft and balanced, and then getting through to target as well. Pillar number 10 is stay in the kick, so commonly known as keep your head down. So keep your head down for me isn't as good as cue as stay in the kick. When I think of keep my head down, it's getting really closed off and keeping my head down, sometimes causing that real compression and chop down feel. So for me, stay in the kick is the better cue, because it means that I'm going to finish my follow through and finish the job with my body, win that half meter, all those good things we've already covered. One thing I do want to bring up is nose over toes. So using this pole, you can see that my front of my foot is in the midline of this pole, and keeping my nose over my toes is a really good cue for keep your head down or stay in the kick. So if I'm kicking the ball, and you can see here that I'm actually forward of my toes here, I'm in a positive position, and my body weight and momentum is going forward for my kick. As soon as my nose breaks back, you can see that I'm leaning back and losing power through my kicking foot. So from the side angle, it's a really good place to take a video from and just check that cue is, am I keeping my nose over my toes through the kick? Any kick, whether it's a goal kick or a punt kick, anything out of hand, keep the cue of keeping those nose over your toes. So why I like stay in the kick is quite often when we do make impact with the ball, our eyes are really keen to look up. That means that we're going to lose that nose over toes. So stay in the kick until you've finished that hot part of the kick and won that half-meter post the ball. So that doesn't mean keep your head down and compress on the ball. It just means that get through your follow through, enjoy that hop to target, and then we check for the ball. If we try to check for the ball at the time of impact, we're going to lose our momentum, we're going to lean back, we're going to lose that nose over toe. Win that half meter, stay in the kick, get through your hop, and then check for your ball. So pillar number 11 is all about parking kicks. So like what just happened then, I missed my kicks. Now when it came to games, you've got so many other jobs to do as a goal kicker and as a player on the team. So you need a way to park kicks, move on quickly, and problem solve why you missed that kick. So for me, I had 3 reasons why I missed. My first step was too quick and too big, so I got too excited, which means I was cramped at the ball. The second reason was I didn't stay in the kick long enough. So what we've just spoken about, staying in the kick, I'd come up too early and check out of the kick too early. And the third thing was just Peter. So I did everything I wanted. I had a rock solid plan. I nailed my job, got a good ball strike, but the ball just didn't go over because I didn't judge the wind quite right. So the plan wasn't good. So that was Peter. So from there, I'd run back, get over halfway. I would have worked out which of the 3 it was. I'd then bend down and wipe my boot, which meant the kick was gone. The kick was wiped. I had to move on to my next job. So having a plan for when you're missing kicks is really important, because in games, if we don't get rid of that kick, things will just snowball and the momentum will go really negative rather than parking the kick and getting back to the positive. So following on from the stuff we did on the field today, now we're onto the gym and working on some exercises that we can do to help our kicking game. It's one of the common questions that come up is, what can I do in the gym to help aid my kicking, get more distance, get more power, get more control within our kicking game. So the first exercise we're going to start off with is a monster walk, and then we're going to go into sideways and also moving forward. So it's really good to bring monster walks in, because when it comes to the goal kick, we need both glutes working really hard during the kick. So my left, because I'm a right foot kicker, my left glute works really hard to keep me stable. And again, like we spoke about this morning, my right glute is going to help store energy behind the kick so that we can then put it through the rugby ball. So again, getting the monster walks into our game is going to really get our glutes active. So here's what it looks like. So I like to set the band just above my ankle joint. So what that does is it gets my knees working, and also my glutes have to work to stabilize. It's really important that when I am crabbing across, and I'm trying to keep my body and head nice and still, we don't want to be bobbing around. Cool. So starting from the start position, my core's on, my body's nice and engaged, I'm heading sideways. Not letting my feet come together too close either, not too close. We want to keep that nice distance, just like our squat stance, go outside the squat and then back, working across. So I can feel that both my glutes are really firing here. So this is the sideways motion. I'm trying to keep my head and my body nice and still, and I can feel both glutes really working. So that was the sideways monster walks. Now we're going to go forward. Again, we don't want to be swaying from side to side. So body engaged, moving forward, staying nice and stable. Glutes are really working hard. That band tension's wanting me to come together. I've got to fight with my glutes to keep that band out nice and wide. Really good primer. So if you want to have a band in your kicking bag, you can take it down to the field. Really good way to prime up the body for when you do this. Now, one thing that a lot of kickers have to go through is having tight groins or tight adductors. Now, our adductors really work hard on both the extension part of the kick and also the flexion part of the kick. So what we can use is a rugby ball itself or a foam roller to do our adductor squeezes. So all you do is just down on the ground, put the foam roller or the rugby ball between our kneecaps, and all we're going to do is a set of 15. Now we're going to start pretty light. on for a second, off for a second, through to 15. By the time we get to number 15, I want 100% max effort on this squeeze. So I'm going to start nice and easy. You won't see too much movement. So I'm just on for a second, off for a second, on for a second, off for a second. And I'm starting relatively light. Keep it going. So as you can see, I can use the rugby ball as well. Put it between those two thighs. So a good one you can do down in the field just to turn on these adductors. On for a second, pressure on and off. On and off. This next exercise is all about our posterior oblique sling. So like what we talked about this morning, when I'm getting my rodeo arm working and storing energy, plus my glute, I'm really getting that co-activation between the two that I can then put through the rugby ball. So this drill is really good when it comes to goal kicking. So with our band height, we want to settle up about head height, and there's two stages that we can do this. So if I'm holding the band in my right hand, my right leg's going to go back first. So a bit of tension on the band already. I'll go back into a lunge. My knees just off the ground. I've got 90 degrees here, 90 degrees in my back leg. All I'm doing here, this glute's really firing. I'm getting into a row in my right arm, and as you can see there, this glute's working and my right shoulder is working. I'm wanting to twist, but because I'm trying to keep that core nice and stable, I'm not allowing that body to go. So just getting through 6 reps, good co-activation, body's nice and still. Try not to rotate through my upper body, nice and stable. So now we get into the second stage of this drill where we can actually come out of that reverse lunge. So same cue, right hand, right leg is going to go back. I'm going to get into that nice stable lunge for a start. 90 degrees in both legs. I'm nice and rock solid and stable. I'm going to come up onto that front leg, high knee in my right knee, getting that left glute working, my right shoulder is really locked up, and then going back into that reverse lunge. Coming forward. So again, I love this exercise because there's a direct reflection into goal kicking of that co-activation. Kettlebell transfer drill. So this is all about our ankle stability and also our hips staying nice and strong. So when we're about to kick a rugby ball, we're actually jumping into the plant foot and having to be really stable on that plant foot. I love this drill because it's a really good way to build up our off kicking foot. So quite often when we try to learn with our left foot or our off foot, it's actually our plant foot that's really unstable. So therefore we're really unstable trying to learn to kick. So this is a great drill just using a kettlebell. All we do is standing on my plant foot. I'm nice and balanced for a start, starting with the kettlebell on my midline. I'm just going to take that kettlebell out to the side and then transfer it across my body. Now this drill looks really easy, but as you can see, my knee, my foot is working really hard to keep my stability. And as I get more confidence, I'm trying to go for about 30 seconds, just get slightly wider with the transfer. And as you can see, that's asking my body to balance and really keep my plant foot nice and stable. So our hamstrings are not only really important when running around the rugby field, max effort and sprinting, they come into play when it comes to goal kicking. So not only are they going to help with our flexion out the back with goal kicking, storing energy, they're also going to help us decelerate when we get to the ball through our plant foot, and obviously when we get through our nice high follow through, they're working to decel and keep our control as well. So we're going to do a drill on the bench and ISO hold, working our hamstrings, and this is all just for time and max effort. We want to try to get up around that 30 seconds, 45 seconds if we can. So not straight legs, not locked out completely. We just want a slight little knee bend, as you can see there. So not 90 degrees, just a slight knee bend. We still get ourselves up there using both feet, so we take ourselves up. As you can see, there's a small bend, and all I'm doing is just taking one leg off. So my right leg's off, my left hamstring's working really hard. We're just staying there and holding there for as long as we can, trying to get to sort of that 30-second mark. So our last exercise is all about our hip flexors, and again, they're a really big part of our kicking and kicking movement. Now quite often these get tight because they've been used so much repetitiveness. So what we need to do is build up our endurance in each hip flexor. So what we're going to do is a hanging knee raise. The key with this is doing the drill really well. So it's really easy to jump on a bar and hang and flop around all over the place, but we want to really engage the body completely still and really loading up that one hip flexor. So when we are hanging, I want to see my scap scaps engaged, my body's locked out. If I was about to get punched, you'll be able to see that my core's really engaged and the body's really still. And all we're going to do is bring up my right knee. I'm going to hold that for 3 seconds and then go back down, switch over, switching up. So jumping up on the bar. So for a start, that's me fully hanging out. So I'm going to get my scaps engaged, my core's on, my feet are in front. I bring up my right, 3, 2, 1, back down. Now bring up my left, 3, 2, 1. So what I'll demonstrate now is the difference between being really slack on the bar and then having our body engaged, those scaps on, all those good upper body muscles we want on when we're kicking. So from the bar, if I just fully hang, you can see my ears are touching the side of my arms and I'm fully extended. When I get my scaps on and my body engaged, you can see that my back's nice and strong now. And then when I do bring my leg up, I can really hold tension through my upper body. Hey guys, thanks so much for getting through this full video. It's been really fun for me to get all my ideas when it comes to goal kicking. It's such a passion of mine. Obviously, when I was playing, getting all the different coaching information and working out what worked for me. I think that's the big key to it is finding what works for you, trial and error, stick with something for a certain amount of time. If things change, you can change and try out a different technique, a different kicking tee. I've been through most of these experiences myself as a kicker. So as I was saying, it's been great over the last 3 years of starting this Rugby Bricks project to get all the information together. I've gone through these pillars, I've worked on them, I've gone through them with players and kickers and myself experimenting. So it's been really good to put it all in one place. One thing we always get through Rugby Bricks, Facebook or Instagram or any platform is frequently asked questions. So the same questions keep coming up. So I want to finish this video off by answering those questions, and hopefully you guys can take this information and use it in your own kicking game. So let's jump straight into the questions. So many kickers, especially when you're young, are in such a rush to add distance to their kicking technique. I myself was one of them. But your body is still growing, you're still developing, you still haven't got your full strength yet, so you can't be in too much of a rush to get there. Plus, if you are, and all you're trying to do is get max distance, trying to kick the ball further than anyone else in your team, chances are your technique's probably going to go off a little bit. So my best advice for how to get more distance is by really working on your technique, getting your timing better, getting your structure better, so that everything becomes more effortless. So it's not a max effort every time to try and kick the ball as far as you can. So eventually, as time goes on, when you sort of get around sort of 18, 19, 20 years of age, you should now be getting to some really good power within your kicking. If you're still struggling, at the very start of this video, we talked about all those different body movements. So now all of a sudden we're going to start using our body much better. I use that example of the weightlifter putting the power clean together. Everything has to work well, and then the weight goes up really easily. But that weightlifter's had to work up to that weight. They haven't just jumped from 0 to 100. So be patient with it. Become obsessed with your technique and really good ball flight and really good ball strikes, and the distance will come. Last thing on this, there's a lot of kickers nowadays and playing Super Rugby. I know Richie Mwanga himself talks about not going after the big long range kicks anymore. They really focus on their technique, and if their range is 45 metres, that's all they're worried about, and that's where they're going to kick from. Whenever I used to kick into a strong headwind, I changed up a few things. So if this was my ball setup, I always used to try have the ball sitting on around about a 45. I felt like at the start of my kicking career, I'd really try to flatten the ball out and really punch it. This changed my whole kicking technique, because all of a sudden now my ball looks different, my contact's different. So what I would do, if 45 is your usual, just dip the ball just slightly, and all I focused on is winning that half metre, and probably winning it a little bit quicker than what I usually do. So just like what we talked about in the 10 pillars when it comes to momentum, if you think, right, I'm going into headwind, I'm really going to stay in this kick, I'm going to really punch through this half metre post ball and get through that quickly, and that means that my foot's probably going to stay lower for longer and really dart that ball into the wind. So that's all you can really do into the wind. If you've got a little bit of side angle, again, just commit to your line, have that long target. But it is a skill that you need to work on. So don't always go down to the end of the field with the wind. Have a crack going into the wind and see how good you can get at it. Last thing on that, come up with a really rock solid plan. So when you're putting the ball on the tee, this is my plan, this is the wind I'm feeling, I'm going to commit to this plan, and generally good things happen. Whenever I have a kicking session with someone, it's always about them kicking the ball first before I try to enforce any ideas or cues or techniques. So I really need to see them take at least 20 kicks before I start offering feedback straight away. I'm all about having an individual technique. The reason why I came up with the 10 pillars is it doesn't matter what technique you use, you can fit into the 10 pillars. So mindset, doesn't really matter what technique you've got. Ball setup, just tell me what your ball setup is. All the pillars have really good detail in them, and I guess what I try to get the kicker to understand is if I ask you about a single pillar and you can't answer me about what you do, you don't understand your kicking technique well enough. So your technique can be your technique. There's a lot of people that have done it before you that have had success, so why not try to learn from them and almost mimic them and see how they've gone about their kicking process. Have a lot of conversations, ask a lot of people, get a lot of feedback, and eventually you'll get to something. When you do get to something really good, commit to it for sort of 2 months and maybe just block out a bit of noise, say, no, this is what I'm focusing on, and see how well you can get that. Yes, so when I was kicking, I used to kick off a really low tee, and I've got nothing against low kicking tees, but what I found for my kicking foot and my technique is I'd always get that one where I'd wrap the ball too much and get the ball to hook away. So that was the issue I was having. So therefore, my coach at the time, Tony Brown, he's now with the Highlanders, coaches Japan, he got me up to a new kicking tee around about the same height as the RB Vortex mid-cut. So that just meant that the ball was a little bit higher for me. It was leaning forward. I could get my foot up the back. And instantly, the thing that it taught me is goal kicking shouldn't be as hard as your punt kicking. So if you're punting the ball downfield really well, and then you go to your tee kicking and you can hardly hit it, there's no reason for the tee to be just as hard as your punt kick. So hence why I went to that. Tee a little bit higher, leading the ball forward. I could hit this ball so much more consistently. Goal kicking became so much more enjoyable, and I just really enjoyed. So I changed that up, and I've tweaked things throughout my whole kicking career. Not so much tweak technique things, but just had really big focuses. So one of the big things for me was a slow first step on my approach. So that was just a real focus for sort of a month's time. I'm doing this every kick I take. My first step is slow no matter what. So this is something that all kickers have got to go through, playing on club fields or wet fields in the middle of winter. I know coming from the down south of New Zealand that we had some shocking fields come near the middle of the season. What I used to do is just square my approach up a little bit so that my plant foot wasn't coming in on such an angle and wasn't so much force going through my foot. Now yes, I did have to allow for that a little bit because now all of a sudden I wasn't getting through the ball normally, but if I was slipping over I wouldn't even kick the ball anywhere. So that was the small adjustment I made just with my plant foot to get that set, but I'm pretty sure everything else can stay the same. If it's not a kick that has got max distance or you're really trying to hit the ball well because distance is an issue, I think you can probably just rely on your timing a little bit more. So just dial back the force that's going through the ball, get a good plant foot, and you should be good in the mud. For me, I became really obsessed with goal kicking around the age of 20. So I used to go kicking on game day in the morning. Now this was all just to keep the rhythm because I wanted to feel really good in the afternoon when I was playing. As I sort of developed and started to get a little bit older, my last session before the game was actually in the warm-up. So the warm-up kick is really crucial because this is when you can get a feel for what your body is doing on this day. So your body's not going to feel the same every day of the week, especially on game day if you're full of energy. And I used to love pre-game kicking because your body feels $1 million, you've got so much energy, the crowd's starting to roll in, you just strike the ball so well. So you need to figure out, okay, this is what I'm doing today. So it's all about warming up well, getting a feel for the ball, few punt kicks. I always started with punt kicks to get a feel for the ball, strike the ball well, going back to that cue of hit the ball well, any style of kick that you're doing. And then I'd really realistically only have about 10 games pre-kick, and mainly from just in front or just to the side of in front. I didn't worry about getting out into the woods because all I cared about was what did my technique feel like, how well I was kicking the ball, getting a good ball flight and getting good confidence going into the game. Good question, and a lot of people find it way easier kicking from the sideline. One, because there's less pressure because people don't expect you to get those sideline kicks. The other thing is you've usually got spectators or people in the crowd right there with you, so for some reason that brings a lot more focus to the kick and you're really dialing on the ball because it feels safer to focus all your attention through the ball. And the more important, and probably the one that I think that it is because it's a long target. So quite often at training, everyone's mucking around, the forwards come over, the coaches have a kick from the sideline corner, and generally a lot of people get it. I think it's because the target's so far away, it gives you that long target automatically. So therefore you focus on it, you really dial in, and that's why you nail those long range kicks. So that's why having a long target is important, even when you're right in front. Instead of just looking at this big open space of the post, have a long target, spot something through the post in the distance 20, 30 meters, and that's your line of the target, just like the sideline kick. So if you're brand new to goal kicking, generally you've either played another sport or you've grown up kicking something. So if you've grown up kicking soccer, I'd recommend going off a low kicking tee because your foot strike's coming through relatively normal. If you're in Australia and you've played a lot of AFL and Aussie rules, your foot strike's much higher because you've been kicking out of hand, so I'd recommend something a little higher. From what we've seen with sales for the kicking tees, we've seen a lot more of the higher tee. I think you can get a slightly nicer ball stroke on it. Your foot's up the back of the ball, so it's slightly an easy place to start. If you've never kicked before, we've got to start with some of that body training because we've got to be able to tell our body what position we want to get it into. And the second part of it is find a kicker that you really like and you say, I want to look like him when I kick. So that's what I did growing up. That's what kids do when they see their superstars on the TV. I want to kick like that person, so I'm going to mimic them, I'm going to do their approach, and it's a really good place to start when you're learning out. Just follow someone that you admire and trial and error, work out what works for you. We've all had games where we've put the ball on the tee, we're standing at the back of the mark and we've got no idea where the ball's going. We haven't got the trust in our kicking technique, we haven't got the trust in our process, and we just haven't done enough kicking to be really confident on the field. So if you are having a lot of misses or you're at training session and things just aren't going well, I always go back to punting the ball. So I can generally every day of the week punt the ball really well. I can get the feel back. So kicking and goal kicking should be just as easy as punting the ball out of the hand. So getting nice strikes on the ball, the feel of the ball. If we hit the ball well, generally it goes where we want it to go. So you're having a shocker. If you're in a game and you've got no trust in yourself, I would hand the kicking duties to someone else. If you're an experienced kicker and you want to stay in the fight, stay in it and slow things down, back your technique. You've done the work, trust it. I've had to do that in games before and you managed to get out of that hole. But yeah, best advice I can give is training session, or if you can, get back to punting the ball. You can hit the ball really well and get the feel that you want through your foot. As you get through the grades, the balls will get better. If you can get your hands on a nice quality ball, one that's got a good sweet spot and good grips that you can work on your passing, that's great. It's not essential. Every good kicker that you know has gone through their life, they've had a bag of balls that have got no grip on them, they're all rough, they've got different seams, they're different sizes, and I feel like it's a really good thing for you as a kicker to have to adjust to. So don't be in a rush to get the fancy gear, the fancy boots, the fancy balls. Those things will come. Put in the hours, which whatever you've got, whatever you can afford or whatever you can get your hands on through your club or through your school, whatever those balls are, just use those. Nice boots are always really nice to wear because they're comfort and they've got really good grip, and I've kind of changed my tune a little bit on this. I used to say it doesn't matter what pair of boots that you wear, but I guess if you're feeling good, you're feeling balanced and you're really happy with your boots because your plant foot gets in a great position, you feel balanced and you get nice strikes, the laces and the way the boot's designed feels really good. I think there's not many tools that a rugby player can buy when they play rugby. So your boots and your mouthguard are the only two things you've really got control over. So I think if you can get your hands on a nice pair of boots, it does make a difference. But if you haven't done any work on your technique, and we're only talking about 1%, if that, when it comes to a good pair of rugby boots, if you haven't got yourself to sort of that 98, 99% of a quality technique, it doesn't matter what you wear on your feet, you're not going to be a good goal kicker. So put your time into your goal kicking. If you're a youngster, it doesn't matter about your boots, kicking bare feet, you can still work on your technique and develop that. Guys, thank you so much for watching this Rugby Bricks detail video when it comes to goal kicking. Again, it's my absolute passion. If you haven't already, download the workbook that comes with this detail episode. All the good stuff is in there, all the information that you need around the 10 pillars, body training, the gym exercises are in that document. Good luck with your goal kicking process, and two big things when it comes to Rugby Bricks is outwork and outlearn.